One thing I've noticed about liberals is that they very often do not actually have their own ideas, but rather what they do is simply parrot talking points they've heard elsewhere, and often talking points that have zero basis in reality. Now, of course, you could say the same is true for conservatives or the alt-right, but some of the talking points that liberals will parrot are just so divorced from reality that it's actually hilarious. Now, I have an almost autistic interest in movie ratings, and one thing I've noticed is that liberals will always repeat this line. Like, whenever there's a discussion about movie ratings online, they will always say, "Oh, you can stab a breast in a PG-13 movie, but you can't fondle it." Or they say, like, "Oh, you can show any amount of any amount of violence in a PG-13 movie, show so many people getting killed, just as long as you don't have any sex or profanity." Now, some people will acknowledge that you can't show much blood, but they'll say, "Oh, you can show any amount of violence, just as long as there's no blood." And that is just categorically untrue in all on both counts. Like, there are very strict restrictions on how much violence you can show. Showing people getting stabbed, for instance, there's a lot of movies that are edited for showing people getting stabbed, even if there's not much blood. Like, for instance, there's a fight scene in The Transporter, the first movie, where Jason Statham stabs a bunch of guys. Like, he's not even killing them, he just takes out a knife and he starts stabbing them, like, to wound them in the arms and legs and shit. And that whole part was cut from the movie, even though it wasn't like very bloody or anything, because they just don't like showing people getting stabbed. They had a scene in the Avengers where Phil Coulson gets stabbed by Loki. That was edited. Also in the first Transformers movie, a guy was stabbed by, that scorpion type transformer, and that was edited. So and when it comes to gunfire, they're ridiculous. Like, what was it? The Mummy. I think both of the first two Mummy films had to edit their shootout scenes because they were too long and too many people getting shot. Definitely in the second Mummy film. The Peter Jackson's movie, The Frighteners, he was trying to get a PG-13, but they complained, among other things, that there was one scene where there are too many shotgun blasts through a door or a wall, and that was in like 1995, so that was long before Columbine. Um, Actually, what might have started changing it was like the Port Arthur massacre in Australia. That might have been the impetus that made the MPAA start going strict on violence. One thing I've noticed is that whenever one of these shootouts happens, not shootouts, one of these shooting sprees happens, one of the school shooters or Elliot Rodger or one of those kinds of neats who goes on a spurging rampage. Basically, every time there's a beta uprising of some sort, they will make the movie rating stricter in regards to gunfire. And then they'll ease up after a little while, like they'll slightly ease up, but then another one of these shootings will happen and they'll make it stricter again. So there's a bit of a cycle to it. I've noticed this over the years. Um, like, say for instance the Bourne Legacy, that shitty spin-off Bourne movie without Jason Bourne. It had a scene where a guy, he's sort of like, I guess he's like a sleeper agent. He just kills a bunch of other scientists, and that scene was pretty hardcore for a PG-13. I think there's also a similar scene in Jack Reacher where the sniper shoots a bunch of people, and it's pretty graphic for PG-13. Like, there was like blood sprays and everything in that scene. And I'm pretty sure both those movies um came out, or at least were rated by the MPAA, a long time after there'd been any shootings, any of these mass shootings, whereas after the mass shootings happen, they will get more strict. And so, like, the idea that you can just put obscene amounts of violence in a PG-13 movie as long as there's no blood, or even with blood, like, that's bullshit. That's much more true for the television rating system. The television rating system is exactly like what they say. You can't show that much sex. You can't even say the word shit. Uh, but you can show like Hannibal has like almost like NC-17 levels of violence, like absurdly gory stuff. Like, my dad, he's a veteran of watching plenty of movies and TV shows with me. Like, he's watched pretty much everything, every movie out there along with me. And even for a guy who's watched countless hard R-rated movies, the TV show Hannibal was difficult to handle at times because of the level of gore in that show. And that is a network television show. That means, like, anyone can watch it. I think it's rated like TV-14, which is their equivalent of PG-13. And the interesting thing about Hannibal is there's one scene where they showed some guys' butts, naked butts, and like on some corpses, and they said you can't allow that. So what they did was they put all this blood to cover it, and then like, oh, that's okay now. So the TV rating system is actually like that line that leftists parrot, where they say, you can't show nudity or sex at all, or profanity, but you can show endless amounts of violence. No, basically that's not how the movie system rating system is. It is how the TV rating system is. It is also to an extent how the video game rating system is. Like the initial Call of Duty games, the World War II ones, like the first ones that came out, those got rated teen despite the fact that you shoot countless amounts of people. Um, Also a lot of other T-rated video games are like that. Um, so yeah, it's really the movie rating system is not like that at all. Like there's pretty strict regulations on gunfire, like how many people you can show getting shot. Like PG-13 movies cannot show endless numbers of people getting shot. Like say for instance the movie Equilibrium, even though there was not much blood in it, it still got rated R largely because of the sheer number of people who got shot and the sheer amount of gunfire. The same is true for the first Matrix film. Um, yeah. So the only movies where they really allow lots of gunfire are certain PG-13 ones like Aeon Flux or Ultraviolet, and that's because it was like futuristic, so they allow a bit more. But even then, there's limitations. Like Equilibrium was futuristic, but there was even more people got shot in that. Um, so yeah, basically this and the Max Payne movie had probably like it wasn't shitloads of people getting shot, but it was more than your typical PG-13 film, and that movie had a very hard time getting the PG-13 rating. And there was not much blood in it, just people getting shot. It wasn't even like a ton of people getting shot. It was just like more than typical for a PG-13 movie. So yeah, I mean, the fact is they are pretty strict on gun violence in particular. Like say for instance The Mummy Returns, the second Mummy film, it was not edited for any of the like, the horror movie type gory stuff with like the mummy, it and all that related supernatural stuff. No, that was fine. What they had a problem with was the shootout scene in the British Museum. Because there was too many people getting shot, too much gunfire. So that goes to show like the MPAA actually they're not a bunch of conservatives. They actually do listen to what liberals say, and they do operate along a liberal rating system to some extent because they are strict when it comes to gun violence in particular, and they're strict when it comes to knives as well. So it's like the idea that they are so lenient toward violence and harsh towards sex and language. There's no truth to that. Not for the MPAA. Yes, for the TV rating system and the video games to some extent, but not the MPAA at all.